Hi, I'm going to be I'm going to try today to start to doing this not only with the audio but also with the video. Uh, uh, this, it's work in progress. But today's uh, podcast is about the Haftorah today, Parsha BeHaaloscha, and it's being sponsored by my good friend Dov Hirsch in Muncie, who was sponsored before. It was very kind when he heard that we didn't have one, so he stepped forward. And this is being done Lezecher Nishmas, his grandfather, Yisrael Shlomo ben Chaim Tzvi Cohen, hope to Neshama Avaliyah, and he appreciate his support and sponsorship. Now let's get down to the body of our remarks. Hi, let me see here. Okay, I'm going to try to uh, do this Haftorah podcast at the same time, audio and video, because my team's been trying to get me to do this, and I hope it'll work out. And once I get the hang of it, I'll try from now on, when possible, anyway, to put this out on the YouTube as well as on the podcast. But we're looking at the Haftorah today, without getting into further ado, of this week Parsha BeHaaloscha, which of course is Roni B'Simchi, and the plain meaning, as often happens with the Haftorahs, is they want to get to something that resembles uh, the Parsha, and since in the Parsha you have BeHaaloscha Saneros, Aaron lighting the candles on the Mishkan, so we want to find a biblical passage that speaks about the high priest, or some priest anyway, lighting the candles in Beis Hamikdash. Of course, in Zechariah's famous prophecy, so you have the seven-branch menorah with the with the gulos and with the whole thing coming out. That very vivid dream in which he says "Lo b'chayil v'lo koach" and all that. And so the result is you have a approximation of what's going on in the parsha. But the most interesting part, in my opinion, and as often happens, by the way, they precede it with some extraneous stuff. When it says Roni B'Simchi Bas Sion, that's really the end of the previous, prophecy. But you don't want to start off in bad note, because right away, by Irenaeus Yeshua Kona Gadol, that in the famous vision, I know you know this, in the famous prophecy of Zechariah, it's a nevuah, right? So he sees the Satan standing next to the Kohen Gadol with dirty clothes. It's a Kohen Gadol's dirty clothes. And we don't want to start a Haftorah saying you saw the Kohen Gadol being attacked by the Satan. So you preceded with a couple of psukim beforehand, and that's why you have, from Perek Beis, let's see over here, the last 3 or 4 psukim, until you get to the part by Irenaeus Yeshua Kohen Gadol Omlich Malchem Basat No Meidon Al Yamino L'Sitno. You don't want to start a Haftarah which says that you saw the high priest with Satan about to attack him or something like that. But why is the Satan, that's the heart of the prophecy? Although, to be perfectly honest, the main part that I say has to do with our Parsha comes towards the end when he says, Ra'isi menorah zohav kula v'gula rosha v'shiva nerosel, that he sees all this 7-branched, it's like a menorah. That's a nevuah, mind you. It didn't happen, okay? 2 olive trees, and it's hooked up to the olive trees, and the same malach, that told him trouble before, is now facilitating, and he's asking the malach what's going on, and he says lo b'chai v'lo b'koch kim baruchi. Oh, that's nice, but the heart, the controversial part, the interesting part, is what are the dirty clothes that the Kohen Gadol is wearing? That the Satan is criticizing him for this, and Hashem said, bug off. Hello, Ud Mutzamesh. Leave him alone. He's a survivor of the Holocaust, as we say today. Very famous image. Again, it's prophecy, the prophetic image. So what are the dirty clothes? So, first of all, we don't know. Right? Doesn't tell you in Zechariah why it's dirty clothes. Begum sewing. And what does sewing mean? I mean, sew means, from... so does he really mean that? Is he walking Beis Hamikdash? It's unthinkable. So what's exactly going on over here? There is a famous Chazal that seeks to answer this problem in a very sound way. It would seem by saying the guy had children who married Goyim. He had two married sons. Where do you get that from? It says so explicitly in the book of Ezra. If you look in Ezra, which is necessary for everybody to read, in the first 6 chapters, Actually, I'm wrong. This is the last 4 chapters. The book of Ezra is divided in 10 chapters, although the Goyim set up the chapters, but for our purposes. And the first 6 chapters are no to what we're going to talk about today, and the last 4, because in the last 4, Ezra himself shows up in Israel. Second Aliyah, this is right after the second temple is built, and he comes there to be mechazik the Yiddishkeit, very famously, and he finds the big problem with intermarriage, and he launches a campaign against the intermarriage. That's the substance of the book of Ezra, and the second half, and he names names. Okay, at the very end, excuse me, he says the following are the people of Mary Goyim, and he was on a campaign to get him to get rid of them. And 2 of them are the sons of the high priest of Yoshua, HaKohen HaGadol. So it's black and white, right? It's black and white. He named names. Consequently, when they say you have a vision of somebody living at that time, Zechariah is a contemporary of Ezra, as you'll see in a minute. So, and you have a Kohen Gadol who has this pagam on him that his kids are married to Goyim. These would be the dirty clothes. So that's Rashi, and I bet you've heard that before. You don't need to hear that from me. But it don't say that. And it's not, it kind of makes sense, but you could also say it doesn't. It's not a push-up shot type word, because it doesn't say everybody remove the clothes and make your children, get rid of their wives. It doesn't say that. You could say that's what it means in the prophecy, but it's unclear. And so what's really interesting to me is the other mahalochs, especially if you take the trouble to look. You got your, let me see now, your Ibn Ezra and your Ibn Ezra Bojansi. All of whom are in the good old-fashioned art scroll Mikras Gedolas. No, you don't need me for this. It's the Mikras Gedolas, and I even highlighted it when it says over here. The Ibn Ezra is very interesting, and this Rebbe Lezer Bojansi, who's in the Mikras Gedolas. I'm not quoting some obscure person. And what are the dirty clothes? Now, I'll go right to Ibn Ezra, and then I'll tell you what the other guy says. The Ibn Ezra says that we're not talking about the intermarriage problem whatsoever, because that happened later than this prophecy. They weren't married at the time to Goyim. You could argue with that and say, well, they must have hung around, they must have been dating or something like that. But the Ibn Ezra says that's a mistake. Rather, this is fascinating, the problem is different, the Ibn Ezra suggests. And that is the matzav of the Jewish community in Jerusalem at the time of Zechariah and Ezra, prior to the arrival of Nehemiah. The book of Nehemiah, and these all tied together, shows up. I think many of you, I hope, are familiar to some degree with Nehemiah. And he is the one who builds the wall around Jerusalem, but the temple's already been built. And he's got issues with the intermarried Jews who betrayed the Jewish side in favor of their Arab relatives. And Sanballat and all these jerks, leaders of the Shomronim and the others that caused him a lot of trouble. Those are the adventures of the book of Nehemiah. And in there you'll see that the Goyim in general, and I don't blame the Goyim, the Arabs, the Samaritans, the other groups, who knows who left over all the junk from Moab and Ammon, whatever. We're talking about the beginning of the Second Temple period, 70 years or so after the Churban. There were no Jews in Israel. The Arabs must have had a field day, had a grand old time, and now the Jews are coming back. Obviously, they don't want that. And to be perfectly fair, in the book of Ezra, it says that when the Jews show up and start to build the temple as soon as possible, laid the foundations at least, all the Arabs showed up and said, let us join you, and the Jews said, bug off. Lo lochem v'lo live nos beis Hashem. You guys are out of here. So basically, from day one, have a racist attitude. You guys aren't Jewish. Hit the road. They're very insulting. Therefore, it says they made enemies out of everybody. It's understandable. And the other guys tried to block it. And the first 6 chapters of Ezra, how they tried to block it. And they were successful. I think everybody's pretty familiar with the story. That, what do you call it? How should I put it? the um, Cyrus, the king of Persia, gave him permission to return and build the temple. But then, after the Arabs got ticked off, they persuaded Cyrus to put a stop order, which he did. And for 18 years, you weren't allowed to complete the building of Beis Hamikdash. So it was like a mess. And after 18 years, something happened, and it worked out. They were able to build the Beis Hamikdash. So that means that the time we're talking about, the temple was half built, half finished, and the Arabs were in a position to block the building of Beis Hamikdash and the functioning of the high priest, obviously. According to Ibn Ezra, that is where today's Haftorah is going. The Satan who is blocking him in a prophetic dream is not Satan, the devil, but rather it's the Arabs. The Arabs, the Shomronian, the Moab, the Ammon, all the other junk that was running around over there. You understand? As the Ibn Ezra says, Hasatan is ha'oyev, Kamashal Sasambalat, right? Kasu Sitno, Haim Hoyle Satan li Yoshua. These are the Satans, meaning the enemies of the high priest Joshua. Kilo Yirtzu Shabai Sibmone, be Yeshua Kohen Gadol. And they didn't want the Beis Hamikdash to be built. And then our hero, Yoshua ben Yotzedek, who's the first Kohen Gadol of the Bayis Sheni period, Kates Bavel, Zerubbabel, Lakeshu Neshati, Zerubbabel was the head guy, and Yoshua ben Yotzedek, who's the character in our Haftorah today, he's supposed to be his first Kohen Gadol, and he eventually was. Okay? And he's the one whose children went off the derech, so to speak. So it says over there, Vayarenius Yoshua Kohen Gadol, the prophet Zechariah, who was living at that time, is saying, I saw a vision of Yoshua Kohen Gadol, Lifnei Malach Hashem, but there was an enemy trying to block him. Okay? And I saw Hashem saying, hit the road. God has chosen Jerusalem, so I don't want to hear any efforts on your part to block it. This guy's a survivor from the fire of the Golis. Some say that but Yeshua in this vision, Yeshua was wearing very dirty clothes and standing for the Malach. Okay? And so the Ibn Ezra would say, and so would the other one, Lezer, Bojonsi, and I think the Rabban also, that the problem over here was they're claiming that the Bayis Sheni is junky compared to Bayis Rishon, which was true. Especially at the very beginning, they put up what we call temporary, kind of a shack type situation. It's not Bakovadik. And so you have the Bayis Sheni not starting in the best foot. Not starting in the best foot. And so the result would be, as he says over here, Ki Habagodim, I'm reading from Ibn Ezra. Habagodim Atzoin, what does it represent? Lo hoy lo bigdi kovas severis. It's literally true. Now, it doesn't mean they were covered with soa. They were junky clothes. So here you have a situation in which the first Jews to come back, time with Zerubbabel and all the rest of it, do not come back with a lot of money. And it's sad. And they come back, as we would say, survivors, first generation, trying to put it together. They do want to build a Beis Hamikdash, but they haven't been supplied with cash the way they should be. Now, it does say in the book of Ezra that the others gave money, gold, and silver. It obviously wasn't enough. Beis Hamikdash is a big operation. I don't need to remind you that Shlomo Melech built the first time around, and what they had was not sufficient. And later on in the book of Ezra, it says they're going to bring extra money and stuff like that, but now they didn't have it. Since they didn't have it, so there are people who say, how can you run, excuse me, how can you run a Beis Hamikdash? It's going to be a junky operation. It's not Bakovadik, and therefore it's an insult to Hashem. And the prophet Zechariah is telling him this week's Haftorah, no, it's not an insult to Hashem. Hanochan ki lo hoyla big de kavod v'tiferes. They didn't have kavod v'tiferes, the proper, vessels, vestments of the Beis Hamikdash. Well, that's true. You and I know where were the proper clothing, the Beis Hamikdash. Achashverosh had it. Belshazzar had it, right? Bekelim shonim. What do they say? Uh, the Gemara said, you know this Gemara in Megillah. Uh, Achashverosh was wearing the thing of the high priest because of that party he threw at the beginning of the book of Esther. He thought that the Beis Hamikdash is not going to happen. 70 years are up, nothing happened. We took out the Kalim, the Beis Hamikdash, including the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. That's one of the bad things the Jews did. Russia, how can you go to a party in which the guy's wearing the clothes of the Kohen Gadol, like making fun of the Jews in terms of the fact it's never going to happen again? You're not going to get a temple back. How can you be part of that? So the good stuff was back in Persia. What they brought was junk. Kilo hoyalahem, because the Ibn Ezra says all the Jews had when they're trying to set up the second temple, mizbeach lahakavolas, they put up a stone altar. Vein lam bayis, lo paroches, lo kaporas, lo mizbech hazov, lo bigdei zohav, habegonim mashal, tein l'kavah v'hader. So basically, when it says the Kohen Gadol is not wearing good clothes, the Ibn Ezra takes that as not literally true, in the sense that he had dirty clothes and covered with tzoah, but not covered it. El cheapo, as we would say today, certainly not fitting the level of Beis Hamikdash. And so the question at that time was very interesting. This is giving us, as I understand it, that's all I can ever do, the insight. What was the popular feeling at the very, very beginning, especially during those 18 years of the stop order? How did the Jews take that? They marched all the way from Bavel back to Israel, the 40,000 or whoever it was, and they started their best to start the Beis Hamikdash, and then God made it that it shouldn't happen because there was that stop order in the part of Cyrus, which was continued through Achashverosh down till Pesach Achashverosh, as we all know. Now, I'm sure a lot of people say like this: Hashem doesn't like what we're doing. This Min Hashemayim, it's like a Satmar or something like that. Who says that we're doing the right thing? If it was meant to be the right thing, we would have showed up like Shlomo Melch with a $1 trillion check. Money be no problem. We could order stuff from all over the place. We're not doing it. If Hashem has blocked it, must mean God disapproves of what we're doing. Therefore, the Kohen Gadol take off kaparas. The Beis Hamikdash is not ready yet. And don't do it. Now, the people settled into this way of thinking, and Zechariah is one of the people who was responsible after 18 years for shaking the people out of their lethargy and tell them, let's go and finish the job. How do I know that? It says in the book of Ezra, which I have in front of me, right? It's very famous. I know Ezra pretty well. In the beginning of this 5th chapter, it says, "V'hisna b'chagai neviah u'Zechariah benida neviah al Yehudah." It's Aramaic. Then all of a sudden, Chagai, the Navi, and Zechariah, ding, ding, ding. That's our Haftorah today, Zechariah. They started prophesying al Yehudah, to be Hudu Yerushalayim, who were in Judah and Jerusalem, B'Shem Elohad Yisrael Aleichem, in the name of God of Israel. Now it doesn't tell you, what he prophesied, but obviously, as you follow on, he said, "Get off your duff and start rebuilding the Beis Hamikdash and Fregnish and Shilas. Don't say the Persians have forbidden it. Just do it." Hashem said, "Just do it." Bedayin Kamu Zerubbabel bar Shartil, V'Yoshua bar Yotzedek, and then Zerubbabel and our hero, the high priest Joshua, Yeshua ben Yotzedek, V'Sariv, Lemivnei Beis Hod Yerushalayim, to build the Beis Hamikdash. No, it's to pick up where he left off 18 years ago and to finish the job. V'Imhan Nevai Del Misalhan, and the Navis were with them helping them. So Zechariah himself was involved in the project of finishing up the job. Now, I've spoken about this before. If you know what's going on at that particular time, you'll know that the fix was in. The 18 years correspond to the end of the period of Achashverosh and the rise of the king after Achashverosh, which would be the son, according to the Jewish tradition, the son of Achashverosh would be the son of Esther, who's a baby. Therefore, the country's run by a regency. The big machras on the regency was the prime minister Mordechai. That's where we left off last time. The Mordechai at the end of the reign of Achashverosh was the prime minister, because the book of Ezra takes place not too long before the end of Achashverosh. If you do the numbers, you'll see I'm right. So basically, the guy got married to Esther, then had the story of Purim. Then they had a baby, because until then, she was a Mishamish B'moch. And after the baby's a year old, something like that, 2 years, I forget, he's dead. Maybe she gave him a poison mushroom, for all I know. He's gone. So who's running the empire? Not a 1 year old child, not a 2, 3, 4 year old child. And nevertheless, in the book of Ezra, this child, Daryavish, is sending letters out and giving orders. Well, obviously, the mover behind the throne, the people who are really doing this is Mordechai and the others. So when Hashem tells Zechariah and Chagai, but Zechariah, in our Haftorah today, who's living in Jerusalem, and he's not up, I don't know whether he knew what's happening in Persia or not, who the prime minister is, whatever. Hashem said, tell everybody to get up. And the book of Ezra is very diplomatic. It's written in a very enigmatic and wonderful way. I've spoken about that before. And all it says is, that they prophesied in the name of God Israel. It doesn't tell you what they said, but the next pasuk tells you they started to build the second temple, and the person showed up, and the officer said who gave you permission. But by the time the story's over, what can I tell you? It went through fine. The king of Persia said, or Mordechai, make a check of the archives. You'll find, let me put it this way: the document they wanted to find, which gave permission to build the temple by Cyrus, they found. The document which puts the stop order, they lost, like that, and everything happened happy ending. According to Ibn Ezra, I'm just giving you a completely alternative explanation today to the usual one that's talking about the intermarried children. The Ibn Ezra and some others say, it's a push-up shot thing. And that's very dramatic. And when it says, the Sultan says, how can you build a temple with these dirty clothes? Whereas Ibn Ezra says, without a Mizbeach Hazav, and we don't have what we need. And Hashem is saying like this, just do it, don't worry about it. And the meaning of the prophecy, because it's a nevuah, is Hashem is saying, do it. And that's the meaning of Lo b'chayil v'lo b'koch kim baruchi, which would mean, Hashem says, if you have the right ruach, that's all that matters. If they start a base of machine in a junky way, they'll fix it as they go on, which they did. And they'll improve it as time goes on. But get the thing started. Not by my chayil b'koch, not by my power. Notice I don't need, like Shlomo Melch, gold and silver and diamonds all over the place. Shlomo could afford it. I mean, the guy was loaded. But these guys are not loaded. Kim baruch. And it's okay, because the real menorah in Shemayim is fed by these olive trees. And, in other words, spiritually, the right stuff is happening. You do your part downstairs, and upstairs, whatever needs to happen as far as the hadlokas and eretz every day and their mystical effect on the universe and the offering of the karbanos, all the rest of it, it'll happen the way it's supposed to happen. And God, don't mind about this. You see? And the effect is, you'll remove the dirty clothes and put on clean clothes. Which, I guess to the Ezra would mean like this. Set it up, El Cheapo, use plastic as they say today. And don't worry, when you get a little bit more money, when more Jews show up, they'll fix it. They'll improve it. And Rabbi Eliezer Bozhansky says something along those lines. I'm inviting you to take a look at it. He says the clothes weren't dirty, they were mushan, they were smoked, burning, they were not properly covered. But it all boils down to the same idea. And I'm supplying the part about the historical context, because if it's true what he says, there's a time when Jews and others are complaining about the lack of dignity in the level of the architecture and the whatever they're able to build in the Second Temple. Hashem's a big deal. Right? Hashem's a big deal. That is the meaning when it says in the book of Ezra that the Lord prophesied through Zechariah, the next thing you know, they started building. Which is, don't worry about all this cheap stuff, because Kim Baruchi. Now this, therefore, leaves us with a very interesting Haftorah when you look at the mega historical meaning of it, which is what I'm always interested in. The mega history and the meta history would be the following. We're left with two models. Very interesting. And it could affect the state of Israel today, depending how you look at it. The first temple, as we all know, is very interesting. They waited a couple hundred years till everything was just right. They didn't build a base of Mikdash till everything was just right. That's one model. That's like a, so to speak, a kind of a lechatchila type situation. The Jews were hundreds of years in Eretz Israel, as we know, in time of Shoftim. They never captured Yerushalayim. They didn't get their act together to have one melech and be organized in one melucha until you finally got to Shlomo. So he would represent the culmination of 400 and some years of development till things reached the right point. It was one melucha. They were loaded. They had peace, prosperity. Ish tachas te'eno, ish tachas gafno. Everything was going right. Okay, if everything's going right, now you build a base of Mish on a lechatchila different way, top of the line, billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, because you're doing it right. So that's what you would say would represent the model of if you do a mitzvah, make sure you get it right, and if it takes time, take the time to do it right. Better than doing it in a b'diavad type of way. And fine. The second temple represents a different model. If they didn't wait till they got it right, as soon as they arrived in Israel, from the second temple, period, Zerubbabel and Yeshua ben Yosedek, they were broke, and didn't have the right clothes, and they didn't have the right this and that and the other. They immediately, in the book of Ezra, they said, they immediately started the first altar up. And asking for divine help to improve it as things go on. And they had ups and downs. And indeed, the Bayis Sheni was built, if I can use the term, in a b'diavad type way. However, as time went on, they fixed it. And by the time you got a little bit later, Beis HaMikdash was a pretty fancy operation. The reason I say that is because I know Herod built the third temple way at the end, just before the Churban. But if you look at foreign sources, comes to mind the letter of Aristeas and some others. People visited the Jewish temple, had a reputation for splendid architecture and all that kind of business. Maybe it wasn't like Shlomo Melech, but whatever, according to the period of Bayis Sheni, it was a very chashuva situation, very chashuva building. It was run very well. We find from these other sources. So clearly, they replaced the El Cheapo stuff as time went on. Hanukkah, you may possibly recall, according to some, I don't want to get in this discussion now, when the Maccabees captured the temple, they put up 7 spears, and that was their menorah, because the Greeks had used up all the menorah, melted it down. But the Gemara tells us very famously that as time went on, they replaced that with a proper menorah, made out of gold in the super fancy schmancy way, the way that the menorah has to be made. Then they did it. So you have almost like a Musar Haskell. There's sometimes, and some people, they say, I don't want to do something unless all the conditions are perfect. And until it's ready, I don't want it to happen. Okay? But on the other hand, there's the other model, which says like this. Do the mitzvah now. Do it the best you can. Start it up. And as time goes on, you'll be in the position to improve it. Because if you don't start it now, it probably won't happen. Right? As you see over here, there was an essay for Hashem to say to the Satan, which according to the name of Israel, if I can use the term bad Jews, I don't want to say they're bad Jews, but no, these are Jews. This is Ibn Ezra's interpretation. We're trying to block the second temple from being implemented because it wasn't perfect. It was begadim tzoin. And Hashem is saying, Yigar Hashem son, bug out of here. I don't want to hear that. I want him to start now, no matter how it looks. If Hashem, this is a Navi, this is a Nevuah, the Baruch Shalom is telling you that's what he wants, then that means that's the right way to go. So it's very interesting. A good rabbi can make a nice sermon out of all this. Do you go the perfect route, or do you go to the b'diavad immediate route and get the thing started and going. There are many successful yeshivas and places that get started on the seat of their pants, in a small one-room situation, because they say, let's get off the ground. And as time goes on, eventually we'll get to a big fancy campus, you know. But if you say, I'm not starting the school or yeshiva or whatever the enterprise is until I get all my money together and we buy the campus and we have the building and the dorms are just right and all the rest of it, if you're a Shlomo Melch, you can pull it off. A lot of good projects will be frustrated by the inability to get the perfect, because we all know the perfect is the enemy of the good. I share this today because most of the time, myself included, you take the easy way out of understanding this prophecy. And you say it's referring to the fact that the guy had children to marry Goyim. And that is totally a Halacha Chazal. And Rashi says and all the rest of it. It's well known. But there are other interpretations, and perhaps interpretations that are more nogeata, shall I say, are more striking, and ones which take place, which take account of very interesting and fascinating circumstances of the time in terms of how the Jews in Jerusalem thought about the project of the Beis Hamikdash and things like that, in wake of the fact that they came at great deprivation. They started Beis Hamikdash, and then God ordered Cyrus, to stop and look like the Arabs were being successful, and they took it in the wrong way. That's the meaning of prophecy. How this fits with the state of Israel today is very interesting, because, if you want to, you can play it this way. You can play it a lot of ways. If you want to, you can play it this way. Theoretically, we should wait till all the Jews are from and set up a Moetzes Gedolei Torah, whatever you want to call it, and only then make a modern state or whatever, wait for Mashiach or whatever. That's the Bais Rishon model. So you wait, but when you do it right and fancy. The other way is the Bais Sheni model, which is what's happened. You start your best, you set up a country, you have begodim soim. Notice there's a lot of problems out there. It doesn't look the way it's supposed to look. But lo b'chayav, lo b'kokim baruchi. So it won't be exactly religiously the way you want it now, but you improve it as you go along, and eventually to get where you want to go. I don't know. These are the ideas that struck me with this Haftorah.